channel for further test series. Quiz number 1. This portion is about the grant writing and research management. Which of the following was not listed as a reason why you should care about research methods? A. Having a strong foundation in research methods helps you make informed decisions. B. Scientific research methods differ greatly between fields and therefore having a strong foundation is a good start. C. It helps you better understand scientific findings and claims. D. It can help you conduct your own research. The correct answer was B. Scientific research methods differ greatly between fields and therefore having a strong foundation is a good start. What is converging evidence? A. When research in different fields are interested in the same topic. B. When an individual uses different types of methods to answer a research question. C. When a finding is supported by multiple research studies. D. When multiple labs are interested in the same phenomenon. The correct answer was C. When a finding is supported by multiple research studies. Which of the following is not one of the steps in evaluating claims in research that is suggested by the textbook? A. Taking the claim at face value if it is made by an expert. B. Finding the original article. C. Searching for replicated findings that support the claim. D. Interviewing a professor of the same discipline. The correct answer was D. Interviewing a professor of the same discipline. Why are secondary sources sometimes not as good as primary sources? A. Secondary sources are research articles that supplement primary sources. B. Secondary sources may misinterpret findings. C. Secondary sources are not written by researchers. D. Secondary sources are only written after the author of the primary source is deceased. The correct answer was B. Secondary sources may misinterpret findings. What did Eric Staple do that was considered fraud? A. Make up fake data. B. Plagiarize sections of others' research articles. C. Only report findings that he thought were good. D. Over-exaggerate the effects of his findings. The correct answer was A. Make up fake data. Mark Hauser and Diederik Staples fraud cases suggest that A. It is not always clear when a behavior is considered fraud. B. Manipulating data to the point where one is making up data and or changing data values is fraudulent. C. Scientific journals are very good at detecting fraud and very rarely do fraud researchers successfully publish their findings in high-end journals. D. Fraud often occurs due to junior researchers' mistakes than the intention of more senior researchers. The correct answer was B. Manipulating data to the point where one is making up data and or changing data values is fraudulent. The example outlining the anti-vaccine movement is evidence that which of the following is true? A. Trusting experts is not always a good idea. B. Mistakes in the scientific community do not have lasting consequences once the claims have been retracted. Scientists make mistakes all the time. C. Researchers are severely punished for making false claims. D. It is important to read the original article that made a scientific claim. In this case, the original article in The Lancet actually did not argue against vaccines. The correct answer was A. Trusting experts is not always a good idea. When evaluating research, which of the following is the least helpful piece of information? A. Who conducted the research? B. Whether or not the research is published. C. Where the research was conducted. D. How many researchers participated in the research? The correct answer was D. How many researchers participated in the research? Which of the following is not a weakness of preliminary findings? A. The findings might change when all the data is collected and or analyzed. B. The findings can still be submitted to a conference. C. The findings are good enough to be published. D. None of the above. The correct answer was B. The findings can still be submitted to a confer. Journal. A. Contains published research that is reviewed by experts. B. Contains published research that is reviewed by editors who may not be experts in the specific field. C. Will usually have a low rejection rate because experts submit to them. D. Contains submissions that are always accepted because they want to encourage scientific progress. The correct answer was A. Contains published research that is reviewed by experts. Our ability to make quick, though not so perfect decisions to solve problems can often be attributed to A. Theories. B. Heuristics. C. Cognitive biases. D. Scientific methods. The correct answer was B. Heuristics. The availability heuristics leads to which of the following? A. Favoring anecdotal outcomes. B. Underestimating events that are salient. C. Overestimating events that are salient. D. Disfavoring anecdotal outcomes. The correct answer was C. Overestimating events that are salient. The anchoring heuristic leads to which of the following? A. Making an estimate of an unknown quantity based on a particular value. B. Favoring unknown quantities over known quantities. C. Favoring arbitrary quantities over non-arbitrary quantities. D. Overestimating unknown quantities when estimating based on arbitrary values compared to non-arbitrary values. The correct answer was A. Making an estimate of an unknown quantity based on a particular value. Discounting of base rate information occurs when A. One uses anecdotal evidence over other sources of evidence. B. One uses objective empirically derived evidence over anecdotal evidence. C. One overestimates the base rate due to insufficient evidence. D. One underestimates the base rate due to insufficient evidence. The correct answer was A. One uses anecdotal evidence over other sources of evidence. The effects of framing are largely based on A. Wording of the phrase. B. Timing of the phrase. C. Number of listeners of a phrase. D. Expertise in a certain domain. The correct answer was A. Wording of the phrase. Up his or her own research claims despite empirical findings that counter them is displaying which two biases most strongly? A. In-group bias and selfing bias. B. Selfing bias and belief perseverance bias. C. In-group bias and belief perseverance bias. D. Selfing bias and causality bias. The correct answer was B. Selfing bias and belief perseverance bias. The result of biases are that they A. Influence outcomes in a systematic way. B. Influence outcomes in an arbitrary way. C. Cause unpredictable outcomes. D. Only affect non-experts. The correct answer was A. Influence outcomes in a systematic way. Which of the following accurately describes the message conveyed by the textbook about heuristics and biases? A. They are sometimes unavoidable and always bad. Science is doomed due to their existence. B. They are sometimes unavoidable but it is important to be aware of their existence. C. All research is flawed because of them. D. All researchers, if properly trained, can successfully avoid them. The correct answer was B. They are sometimes unavoidable but it is important to be aware of their existence. Which of the following is best categorized as a pseudoscientific claim? A company claiming that experimental results suggest that their product significantly boosts the immune system. B. Bob's grandmother claiming that researchers have found that quality sleep affects how memories are consolidated based on an article she read online. C. A group of expert researchers citing anecdotal evidence in a presentation to claim support to their theory about how stress influences workplace performance. D. A team of undergraduate students drawing conclusions on social media use based on a survey they conducted in a research methods course. The correct answer was C. A group of expert researchers citing anecdotal evidence in a presentation to claim support to their theory about how stress influences workplace performance. Which of the following is not a goal of science listed in your textbook in Chapter 1? A. Description. B. Explanation. C. Prediction. D. Generalization. The correct answer was D. Generalization. In the context of the scientific method, what distinguishes objective and subjective? A. Objective results are obtained via automated processes whereas subjective results are obtained via scientists. B. Objectivity is supposed to be empirical and unbiased, whereas subjectivity stems from individuals' own beliefs and interpretation. C. Objective results are the result of collaborations and subjectivity are the result of independent research. D. Objectivity is less important for scientific research than subjectivity. The correct answer was, B. Objectivity is supposed to be empirical and unbiased, whereas subjectivity stems from individuals' own beliefs and interpretation. Which of the following is not an important characteristic of science? A. Subjectivity. B. Objectivity. C. Public. D. Consistent. The correct answer was, A. Subjectivity. Giving a research participant extremely large numbers of questions for them to answer might most likely result in which of the following issues? A. Decision fatigue. B. Mood effect. C. In-group bias. D. Overconfidence bias. The correct answer was, A. Decision fatigue. The purpose of publishing research in journals helps achieve which goal of science? A. Objectivity. B. Spreading it to the public. C. Check reliability. D. Ensure consistency. The correct answer was, B. Spreading it to the public. Wakefield's work on autism and vaccinations achieved which aspects of the scientific method? A. It is public and based on past knowledge. B. It is subjective, made public, and was consistent. C. It is consistent and public. D. It is public. The correct answer was, D. It is public. Which of the following accurately describes the relationship between applied and basic research? A. Basic research and applied research have little relationship, the two do not really inform one another. B. Basic research helps applied research, but rarely does applied research inform basic research. C. Basic research and applied research are more intertwined than separate. D. It is impossible to distinguish between basic and applied research. The correct answer was, C. Basic research and applied research are more intertwined than separate. 1. Subscribe this channel for further test series. Quiz number 1. This portion is about the grant writing and research management. Quiz 2. Which of the following is a reason why Dr. John Money's decisions in his treatment of Bruce Reamer can be deemed unethical? A. He had personal beliefs related to his treatment. B. He did not present all the information to his patient and/or patient's legal guardian, S. C. His service was not free to his patient and/or patient's legal guardian, S. D. His behavior led to David Reamer's suicide. The correct answer was, B. He did not present all the information to his patient and/or patient's legal guardian, S. On whom does the responsibility to maintain trust between researcher and participant fall? A. Institutions that oversee researchers. B. The researchers themselves. C. The researchers and the participants. D. The participants and beneficiaries. The correct answer was, B. The researchers themselves. Which one of the statements about ethics is true? A. Ethics has not changed since it became part of society. B. Ethics evolves and changes with time and context. C. Ethics does not matter if you are working with non-human animals. D. Ethics are based on codes of conduct that are universal and pervasive across different countries, ethnic groups, and cultures. There is no room for interpretation. The correct answer was, B. Ethics evolves and changes with time and context. In research, which of the following best describes ethics and ethical behavior? Ethics and ethical behavior. A. What constitutes ethical and unethical behavior is generally black and white and extremely clear-cut. B. Ethics and law go hand in hand. All ethical behaviors are legal, and all unethical behaviors are illegal. C. Ethical and unethical behaviors are often in overlapping gray areas that sometimes depend on the context of the research. D. Ethics can be difficult to understand and hard to get right. However, if you follow your institution's guidelines and do all of the required ethics training, you will have absolutely no problem distinguishing ethical behaviors from unethical ones. The correct answer was, C. Ethical and unethical behaviors are often in overlapping gray areas that sometimes depend on the context of the research. Which of the following is an aspect of the Nuremberg Code of 1947? A. Research subjects must be over 15 years of age. B. Research subjects must be compensated. C. Research subjects must have the legal capacity to give consent. D. Research subjects must contain both men and women. The correct answer was C. Research subjects must have the legal capacity to give consent. The Nuremberg Code of 1947 is largely founded upon which historical event? S. A. Nazi treatments of research subjects. B. Unethical research behaviors that existed prior to the Vietnam War. C. The bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. D. The discovery that World War I prisoner treatments left hundreds of thousands in traumatized conditions. The correct answer was A. Nazi treatments of research subjects. Which of the following reasons best describes why the Nuremberg Code of 1947 was not quickly adopted and accepted within the United States of America? A. There was not enough legal action to require it. B. Researchers associated it with Nazi behaviors as an act of immorality, and not with one that is related to researchers working without regulation. C. The guidelines that were outlined in the code were not specific enough. D. The guidelines were relevant but it was too difficult to practically employ them all in one moment. The correct answer was B. Researchers associated it with Nazi behaviors as an act of immorality, and not with one that is related to researchers working without regulation. The Declaration of Helsinki was formally created and approved by which entity? A. World Health Organization. B. Institutional Review Board. C. National Institutes of Health. D. World Medical Association. The correct answer was D. World Medical Association. In relation to the Nuremberg Code, what was achieved through the Declaration of Helsinki? A. The guidelines of the Nuremberg Code were narrowed and more explicitly specified. B. The guidelines of the Nuremberg Code were applied to researchers, too, instead of only to doctors. C. The guidelines of the Nuremberg Code were broadened. D. The guidelines of the Nuremberg Code were more explicitly written in the perspective of research participants. The correct answer was C. The guidelines of the Nuremberg Code were broadened. What were some of the major achievements of the Declaration of Helsinki? A. It clearly defined informed consent and what it means to be a research participant. B. It explicitly stated the role doctors have in safeguarding patients as well as differentiated therapeutic from non-therapeutic clinical studies. C. It explicitly stated the role researchers have in safeguarding patients as well as differentiated basic research studies from applied research studies. D. It laid out specific guidelines for how institutions should maintain ethical conducts of their researchers. The correct answer was B. It explicitly stated the role doctors have in safeguarding patients as well as differentiated therapeutic from non-therapeutic clinical studies. Which of the following is a significant outcome of the Clinical Researc Committee founded by the National Institutes of Health? A. It became the model for the Institutional Review Board. B. It became the first committee to do research on sick patients. C. It became the first committee to invite researchers and doctors to work together. D. It became the first committee to receive federally funds to complete research projects. The correct answer was A. It became the model for the Institutional Review Board. Dr. Henry Beecher's 1966 article in the New England Journal of Medicine had what significance in the realm of ethics? A. It outlined the future of ethical guidelines that influenced ethical practices today. B. It presented unethical cases of research that endangered the health of participants without their knowledge to the public. C. It presented the lack of progress in ethics that the United States was facing, arguing that research needs to be reformed. D. It argued that ethics is overrated and that scientific progress will unambiguously be hindered by an unwarranted focus on ethical behavior. The correct answer was B. It presented unethical cases of research that endangered the health of participants without their knowledge to the public. Which of the following was part of the procedure or outcome of the Tuskegee Syphilis study? A. Researchers and healthcare providers lost the trust of some members in African American communities. B. Researchers deceived the research participants. C. Researchers discovered a treatment for syphilis. D. Researchers' behaviors led to the death of many participants. The correct answer was C. Researchers discovered a treatment for syphilis. Stanley Milgram studied the extent to which ordinary people would be willing to inflict pain on another human. Which of the following describes a potential ethical problem from his famous experiment? A. Participants were led to believe that they were administering real shocks, and this could have been an ethical breach because a researcher should never lie to participants. B. A confederate was used, and utilizing an actor in an experiment could have been unethical. C. The researcher inflicted considerable distress on participants. D. Participants were forced to participate and were not permitted to drop out. The correct answer was C. The researcher inflicted considerable distress on participants. In what ways were Zimbardo and Milgram's controversial experiments similar? A. Although the ethics are questionable, the studies shed light on human behavior that would have otherwise been impossible to study. B. Both studies were ethically questionable due to the level of distress that at least some participants endured. C. Both studies can still be conducted today without any changes to the procedure. D. Both studies incited new laws that changed how research studies are governed at universities. The correct answer was B. Both studies were ethically questionable due to the level of distress that at least some participants endured. A 2001 BBC created a filmed replication of the Zimbardo prison experiment. What was a safeguard that they took to protect its participants? A. There were clinical psychologists who acted as consultants and were on call or on site. B. Paramedics and security guards were allowed to intervene. C. They included a 5-person ethics panel independent of the project that could modify or terminate the study at any point. D. Participants of the film were not deceived. They went in knowing the purpose of the study. The correct answer was D. Participants of the film were not deceived. They went in knowing the purpose of the study. Berger, 2009, attempted a replication of Milgram's famous study. Which of the following was a measure he took to ensure that the replication met ethical standards? A. Participants who could potentially have an adverse reaction to the study were screened out of the study. B. Participants were recruited from college students. C. A clinical psychologist monitored the study. D. Participants were informed right after the study that no shock was given. The correct answer was B. Participan. Participants were recruited from college students. Which of the following is a general principle of the Belmont Report? A. Respect for persons. B. Beneficence. C. Justice. D. Equality. The correct answer was D. Equality. Which of the following is captured by the notion of respect for people's rights and dignity in the APA ethical guidelines? A. Protecting participants' privacy. B. Treating participants as worthy individuals. C. Providing equal access to all. D. Protecting participants' confidentiality. The correct answer was C. Providing equal access to all. Which of the following best describes the Institutional Review Board? A. It is a national committee that reviews all research conducted in most U.S. hospitals, universities, and organizations that support research. They are not liable for the research they approve and merely provide suggestions for ethical conduct. B. IRBs are local to specific institutions that review and are liable for the research they approve. IRB proposals are reviewed while the research is already in progress. C. IRBs review and are liable for research they approve. Researchers must submit proposals and have them approved before commencing their research, and the IRB ensures that the research meets institutional and federal guidelines. D. IRBs are responsible for the behaviors of researchers. They work with researchers on their research in their labs or field to ensure that they are behaving properly at all times. The correct answer was C. IRBs review and are liable for research they approve. Researchers must submit proposals and have them approved before commencing their research, and the IRB ensures that the research meets institutional and federal guidelines. Which of the following is a reason that demonstrates the merits of animal research? A. It allows researchers to explore research questions that examine change over time, since oftentimes animals used in research have shorter lifespans than humans. B. Animal research provide models that can be applied to humans. C. Animal research provides platforms to do experiments that are difficult to perform on humans. D. Animal research does not have ethical guidelines, and researchers are free to do anything they want. The correct answer was D. Animal research does not have ethical guidelines, and researchers are free to do anything they want. How is research with animals monitored so that animals are protected? A. The IRB has a special committee that oversees research involving animals. B. The IACUC is a federally monitored committee at the national level that oversees all research. C. The IACUC is an entity similar to the IRB that oversees animal research at specific institutions. D. Animals are generally not protected and it is up to the goodwill of researchers to ensure that they are protected. The correct answer was C. The IACUC is an entity similar to the IRB that oversees animal research at specific institutions. Mission creep is best characterized as A. Ethical guidelines of research becoming more stringent. B. IRB regulation extending beyond the protection of human subjects and ethical conduct. C. Federal regulations changing such that they want direct oversight on research at universities. D. Researchers creeping away from IRB oversight and conducting research without approval from their respective IRBs. The correct answer was B. IRB regulation extending beyond the protection of human subjects and ethical conduct. The APA's involvement with military torture led to which of the following outcomes? A. Researchers are no longer legally allowed to harm research participants. B. The APA is now solely responsible to maintain the trust between themselves and the public. C. Researchers are expected to follow ethical guidelines, and therefore their participation in military activities of these sorts was deemed hypocritical. D. The APA banned the researchers who participated in torture. Th. The correct answer was C. Researchers are expected to follow ethical guidelines, and therefore their participation in military activities of these sorts was deemed hypocritical. What is the makeup of the IRB committee? A. Federal regulations require 3 members, a natural scientist, a behavioral or social scientist, and a member from the humanities. B. Federal regulations require at least 5 members, one whose focus is on the sciences, one whose research focus is non-scientific, and at least one with no affiliation to the institution itself. C. Federal regulations do not have strict guidelines. D. Federal regulations require at least 6 members, 2 scientists, 2 non-scientists, 2 members unaffiliated with the institution. The correct answer was B. Federal regulations require at least 5 members, one whose focus is on the sciences, one whose research focus is non-scientific, and at least one with no affiliation to the institution itself.